Hey, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. This is now lecture number 2 in our series in Module 3, a look at the topic of business ownership. So, we asked some questions in the first video, all sorts of different questions about who gets to take profit home, who's responsible and legally liable, what happens when we want a succession plan and the owners want to retire, all sorts of questions that are answered by the question, who owns the business and in what form do the owners own the business? Well, in this particular lecture, we look at the very first form of business ownership in the United States, sole proprietorships. What is a sole proprietorship? How does it work? What are some of the advantages and, quite frankly, some of the disadvantages of structuring your business as a sole proprietorship? Remember, there are 3 major forms of ownership: sole proprietorship, partnerships, and corporations. Today we're looking at just sole proprietorships. And what does that mean for a business to be owned as a sole proprietorship? Essentially, it means that the business is owned and operated by one person. It is owned and operated by one person, the founder. The founder is responsible for all the decisions, all the management, all the operations, managing sales, marketing, customer service. It's all rests on the shoulders of one person. Then, quite frankly, sole proprietorships, in terms of the numbers of businesses in the United States, you can see the number there. It's about 3/4, 3 out of every 4 businesses is a sole proprietorship in the United States. But all those businesses combined together only really represent 4% of total business revenues. What do those two last statistics mean? It means that very, very small businesses all over the United States tend to be owned as sole proprietorships. Lots and lots and lots of small businesses. It's one of the easiest ways for someone to go into business for themselves. And so let's look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of running a business, owning a business as a sole proprietorship. The advantages, well, you see them there at the top half of this slide. Running your business as a sole proprietorship gives you immediate freedom. You're no longer working for a boss, you're working for yourself. It's simple to start a business. It has very low startup costs and the paperwork is very straightforward. You simply have to file with the state in which you're going to do business. And quite frankly, there's some very real tax benefits at the early stages, because in the early stages of starting a business, many times you will have at the end of the year net losses rather than net income, and those losses become write-offs on your personal tax returns. But there are some disadvantages to running your business as a sole proprietorship. You can see them there in the second half of this slide. You are liable for all of the debts and liabilities of the business. So, if your business goes under, you typically, out of your own personal resources, have to come up with whatever you still owe to suppliers, to other debts, and those kinds of things that the business has incurred. And another disadvantage, you have limited resources and limited ability or capabilities to get more resources. You're basically running as a sole proprietorship. There's only a finite number of places you can get funding, and you can't get them from other places that different modes or ways of ownership, like corporate ownership, has at its disposal. Another disadvantage is if you're successful and eventually you want to retire, well, typically a sole proprietorship entity ends, it comes to a close when the sole proprietor retires or leaves the business. It's difficult to hand the reins over to someone else. And so you can see there's some distinct disadvantages that go along with the advantages of setting your business up this way. Now, quite frankly, so many businesses in the United States are still sole proprietorships. Why is that? Well, I think that just intrinsically we know the motivation. If you're really good at doing something, I mean really good at doing something, and you're still an employee, you may have at some point in time asked, why is it that I'm working so hard when I'm really the reason for this business's success? Because the work I do is quality, it's value, and I'm only getting paid an employee's wage when the owner of the company, who really isn't doing much of anything, gets to take home all the profits. That's not fair. I could do better if I was running the business myself. And that is the primary motivation why folks go into business for themselves as sole proprietorships, right? It's easy to start. You can immediately start taking home all of the profits of doing your hard work because you're a competent electrician or baker or plumber or painter or whatever it is that you do as a business. Now, that all makes sense, right? But the main reason why sole proprietorships struggle, and many do, and quite frankly, many fail, is because the very reason you went into business, because you're a great electrician, you're a great plumber, you're a great, well, whatever it is that you do for a living, it probably also means, well, you're not the greatest accountant, you're not the greatest customer service person, you're not the greatest at marketing. There's all these other things that are necessary for a business to thrive and succeed. You're good at one thing, but there's a whole host of other activities a business needs that you may not be very good at. If you don't find the right people to do those things, well, quite frankly, your sole proprietorship will struggle. And that's a huge liability. That's a huge disadvantage. One of the real hidden disadvantages of going into business for yourself. Nevertheless, as you can see, 75% of businesses in the U.S. still sole proprietorships. It's a popular mode of business ownership. You just have to recognize what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of this form, sole proprietorship business ownership. I hope that helps. More on this in the textbook, of course, and we'll see you in the next lecture.